Don't know. No, it's okay.
Hi there.
Hello.
Morning, everybody.
Yeah.
Beautiful. We've just hit the midsummer moment here
Yeah.
in the UK. Beautiful weather. England playing Panama at 1 o'clock.
Yeah. Which is striking. Not a lot of excitement in my mind, I would say.
And back to share some of the music we were listening to, in fact, last night.
Yeah.
In the classic VC sharing mode. So, without further ado, we kicked off with a brand new album called, it's Nat Birchall meets Al Breadwinner, featuring Vin Gordon as Don D. Jr., which is a bit of a mouthful. The album is called Sounds Almighty. It's a UK reggae album, I guess, really, but featuring Vin Gordon, who is a fantastic trumpet player. Trombone player, absolutely. Who I used to see regularly playing with the UK reggae band Aswad. He was part of the three-man horn section alongside Michael Rose, who I think was in Simande, actually. And I think a trumpet player called Bammy. Anyway, this has just come out. You can pick it up on Bandcamp. It's a really fantastic, very kind of authentic but very well recorded analog dub album, but with a strong kind of jazzy flavour to it. So there's no vocals, but there's lots of horn lines and lots of trumpet, trombone and sax solos, and very dubby. Quite often sort of dub versions happen in the second half of the songs. But overall kind of a real, for those of you who know these kind of producers, it's got a real sort of Lee Perry meets scientist kind of vibe to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Really did not sound like it was recorded recently at all.
Yeah, and just to sort of say, the actual system here was sounding, I think it's sounding to the best.
Very good.
Every time I see John, something has tweaked.
Yeah.
Last time it was the shit Locky EQ system had been put in. This time I'd moved back to the Nagaoka MP500 cartridge, which suddenly in the third time I've been using it, it just sounds absolutely incredible.
Very good.
And there's a sort of, what is that? Four-way block is like a kind of filter.
Filter, yeah. Mains filter.
A mains filter. So anyway, for those of you who are following the hi-fi journey, that's the latest news. But
my
everything
hi-fi
was sounding
remains
amazing.
exactly the same.
Very good job.
Staying with a reggae vibe, went for a classic Culture on Joe Gibbs' production, who also did the African dub chapter 2 and 3.
1 to 3.
1 to 3, absolute classics. Kind of 70s, mid-70s kind of roots reggae. Great band. Mark also revealed that Joe Gibbs tried to sign the band he was in.
Well, that's in Motown with the only two labels who were interested in this, which was
and considering
very
you were neither reggae or a soul group.
No.
It's quite unusual.
But I have
So
to
anyway,
say, this sounded incredible.
sounded amazing.
I
Yeah.
mean, this is where I sort of
Yeah.
was realising the system was sounding so good,
Yeah.
because I'd bought that album in the mid-70s.
Yeah.
And I always liked it, but it just sounded so
Yeah,
rich.
amazingly rich, actually. Usual kind of Sly and Robbie on... Lloyd Parks on bass, actually, and Sly on drums. Or Noel Dunbar, as he was known then.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Noel Dunbar, yeah. We carried on. The reggae was sounding fantastic. This is... barely see it. It's a very dark album cover. Bunny Wailer's Black Heart Man, which came out, I think, in about 1976. Obviously, Bunny Wailer, one of the three Wailers alongside Bob Marley and Peter Tosh. This, I think, was his first solo album, out on Ireland. Just a brilliant album, and what got me revisiting this was I was watching an interview on YouTube between the UK reggae DJ David Rodigan, who was interviewing Bunny Wailer on Radio 1 Extra, and they were basically interspersing the interview with all the tracks off this album. Every track on this album is fantastic. If for those of you who are earlier on in your reggae journey, this is an absolutely classic roots reggae album. It doesn't get much better.
I'd actually say it's better than 2 or 3 of the last Wailers records.
Absolutely.
Actually. Yeah. Nothing to see on the next one, so I'll just hold the record up. So it's a 12-inch. Then went on to play Gregory Isaac's Soon Forward with its dub attached to it. This is a 12-inch on Frontline, which was Virgin's reggae label. And the B-side's got great. It's got a couple of Prince Farai kind of toasting on it as well. Kind of late 70s roots reggae, really.
Yeah.
With Gregory.
Yeah.
Sweet voice Gregory.
Beautiful voice. Carrying on the reggae selection, we were really hitting that groove. So the first album I played, the Nat Birchall, featured Vin Gordon. This is a very rare piece of pink vinyl, which actually the A-side is Fight I Down by Freddie Clark, but it's the B-side that I particularly like,
Absolutely
which
brilliant.
is the Fire Horns
Fantastic.
track, which just has Vin Gordon credited. And yeah, just a real sort of steppers track, very, very sort of minimal, but fantastic trombone play.
And some very aggressive bass playing, which is quite unusual for a reggae tune.
Yeah.
Then I went for a track by Dr. Pablo and the Cry Tough All Stars. And Dr. Pablo, I'm pretty sure, is Augustus Pablo. It was a B-side of a 12-inch on Hit Run, which was African Land by Carol Calfat, featuring Clint Eastwood, who was
I'm not sure if Dr. Pablo is Augustus
I'm not
Pablo.
sure either.
Because I think I'm pretty sure there's a Dr. Pablo who used to play with Creation Rebel.
Ah, right. Or maybe so that's the one. Okay.
I think so.
Anyway.
Who were very linked up with
very linked up.
Adrian Sherwood.
Yeah, this was Adrian Sherwood's, who ran the famous label On You, still runs On You. Actually, this is a label he had before, which was mostly licensed stuff. On Hit Run.
Yeah, we moved out of the reggae. I was particularly taken with the drum track on this, which is Yusef Days, who was with United Vibrations, and obviously Yusef Kamal. It was interesting listening to it through John's ears, who I have to say is not the biggest fan of the new jazz explosion in the UK at the moment.
Funny, a little bit lucky.
This is Tenderlonious. It's just come out, double album called The Shakedown, featuring the 22 Orchestra. And yeah, it sounds great.
Sounds great.
I mean, it was all recorded in, I think, a one-day session at Abbey Road, and it's, beautiful analogue sounds. Everything sounds great, but as John pointed out, once you get behind the fact that it sounds good and there's quite a nice groove, there's sometimes a little absence of anything more tangible or more kind of experimental going on. It's too early for me to tell because I only got this last week. But yeah.
For me, the one who gets that sound well and also does something interesting is Shabaka, actually.
Shabaka, and I think the Yusef Kamal album is still my favourite of the scene to date.
So rather than somebody not playing very much, somebody almost in danger of playing too much. Yes. Went for Anthony Braxton. Mark went to see Anthony Braxton a few weeks ago at Cafe Oto in London. I didn't go, unfortunately, but just made me dig into my Anthony Braxton collection. Suddenly realised I have about 40, and he's made 300 records.
Wow.
Braxton in different formats, actually, and that doesn't include all the downloads. This is, I think, almost his first. This was his first album on Arista. He got signed to what was a major label then, Arista, and this is the album New York Fall 1974, and played the track which is the side one, cut one. I'm not going to try and pronounce it. This is unpronounceable. And this is the band he had with Anthony Braxton himself, Kenny Wheeler on trumpet, Dave Holland on bass, and on this record Jerome Cooper on drums, although Barry Altschul took over this band. Yeah, kind of very, really interesting to think of an artist like Braxton getting the opportunity to make about 7 or 8 albums for Arista.
This was almost more straight ahead. I mean, straight ahead, but an incredibly complex head at the beginning.
That's right.
I mean, a ridiculous head.
Yeah, I mean, his stuff, he's gone through so many different, this was his kind of closest to being almost like a jazz group phase. The recent stuff has been much more complex and interesting.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw him at Cafe Otto, there was no drummer, but there was 2 harpists, a violinist, a cornet player, and an accordionist.
Yeah.
It was a very, very strange lineup.
Roger Coleman did a nice little thing on Braxton a few quite a few videos ago.
Right. And I think just to remind ourselves of the first of two important smoking covers.
That's right. Yes, absolutely.
Notice the pipe.
Anthony's got his pipe out.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we might need to cut the light down because I'm not sure the covers are showing up. But you carry on.
Okay. John's, we've just got to. Oh, look at that.
I think the covers
It's suddenly gone very dark.
Oh, okay.
No, I think that's okay, John.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe a tiny bit less.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks. Yeah.
Better? Yeah.
Yeah. Let us know if this daylight video is working for you or not. Yeah, we carried on with another track which, well, featured Anthony Braxton in the band, although he didn't feature at all on the track. But Dave Holland was the bass player on that last album, and Dave Holland is playing again on this album, which is by the band Circle, which also featured Chick Corea on piano, Anthony Braxton on the reeds, and Barry Altschul on the percussion, alongside Dave Holland. And we listened to beautiful solo bass piece called Song for the Newborn, which is on the second track on side one. It's an ECM, kind of fairly uncharacteristic ECM live album, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carrying on with uncharacteristic ECM records, then went for Stanley Cowell's Illusion Suite, which was a band with Stanley Clarke playing acoustic bass and Jimmy Hops of Russ Amron and Kirk fame playing drums, and a very, very sparse track called Miss Vicky, which I think is probably the most sampled ECM break ever. So this was an early one. This was the 26th release on ECM. Yeah, great album actually, and sounds much more like almost like something that will come out on Strata East than something on ECM actually.
A very funky, sparse,
very
groove,
and you can hear why it's been sampled so much.
Yeah. Well, this is very unexciting for a VC video. Me showing a CDR of a track, but a track which I will heartily encourage you to listen to, which is by Mono Neon, who is the YouTube sensation bassist, who, if you just check his channel, there's some amazing stuff over the years. Hang on a second. There we go. And it's the track called Hot Cheetos. There's also a fantastic video, a reaction video of a guy driving in his car listening to this. But yeah, it's very, very P-funky, but also very, very contemporary sounding. And Mono Neon playing everything, bass guitar, and a very unusual sort of drum.
Yeah, great tune.
Drum thing.
Something about the production of that made me think of Prince. Well, quite often think of Prince actually. We usually have a full Prince track.
Yes.
But played the Ballad of Dorothy Parker off Sign of the Times, and it's been interesting. I've been reading a lot about Prince in the studio recently, and I didn't realise this track was actually a result of the desk breaking down actually, and so that's why it's got this very, very strange sound that people have been trying to mimic for years. Is that the whole top end was sliced off basically, and you just have this very muffled bass and drum sound. So mistakes are often the best way of getting...
I was about to say, you know, you can't. There's nothing as good as a mistake for a bit of creative change. First, big shout out and thank you to Stavros the Spinning Greek, who we mentioned in our last video had given us an incredibly generous and bountiful selection of VCLT. We listened to the last track on side 2 of the Mondre album, or Mondre. This is the second Mondre album. Out on Motown, there was 3 albums. John had played the first one a few sessions ago. So Andre Lewis was a keyboard player with Frank Zappa, and then latterly with George Clinton and the P-Funk crew. This is just a really, I mean, as you can tell, very sort of futuristic and strangely very contemporary looking album when you think of the Daft Punk thing. But just, quite very electronic. He was, I think, very connected with various sort of keyboard electronics innovators at the time. And just an album that really doesn't sound like anything else. We listened to a track called Doing Nothing, Nothing Doing.
So it's kind of very electronic but very soulful at the same time.
Yeah,
which is kind of unusual.
Yeah.
This has been this again, thanks to Stavros Spinning Greek, this has been an amazing discovery. I've never even seen this record before. This is called Introducing the Iceman's Band, and it's Jerry Butler, the Iceman, obviously his backing band, and series are mostly instrumentals, but absolutely fantastic. And there's a version of People Make the World Go Round, which is, I think, the best one I've ever heard. Which is an absolutely great album. Terrible. I mean, Stavros says terrible cover, but absolutely brilliant record.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Don't judge a book by its cover. In fact, we're going to get up with knobs on them. But yeah, so I mean, if you ever see this, it's absolutely great. Actually, I've never heard of any. The only musician on it I've ever heard of is Henry Gibson, who was Curtis Mayfield's percussionist, but everybody else is new to me. Really, really great record. Thank you so much.
And John dropped that track last month when we were playing at the Vinyl Head record shop, and I have to say the conversation I was having just stopped.
Yeah, it's
I'd never heard this version
really
before.
Good.
I love that tune.
And there's also a great version of Come Together, the Beatles tune in here as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, real good.
Great
Thank you.
stuff.
And we will be responding fairly soon.
Definitely. There's a lovely guitar solo on the end of that track, and that put me in mind of this next artist. This is my sort of monthly addiction to the Pure Pleasure record label, who are doing these incredibly just fantastically clear analog remastered vinyl albums. It's Grant Green and The Final Come Down, which was the only film soundtrack that Blue Note ever put out. Picked this up very, very good price. We listened to the track, The Final Come Down. I mean, it is quite sort of film score-like, so there's little moods, but there's also 2 or 3 really nice tracks in their own right, and the wonderful guitar playing of Grant Green.
There's a live album recorded around the same time at the Lighthouse as that, which I've only got on CD actually, but where the audience just go insane, basically. I mean, I've never heard an audience reaction like it. I've got a lot of crap covers today. this one, count another one. This is thinking of great guitar playing from that kind of similar kind of era. Gabor Szabo's This Macho, which was his last. Well, it wasn't actually officially on CTI, it was on the Salvation label. This was the last one of his 3 records he made with Creed Taylor. And this is actually produced by Bob James, and I played the track called Time. And the band has Bob James, of course, Lewis Johnson unusually on bass, John Faddis on trumpet, Harvey Mason on drums, Ralph MacDonald, Idris Mahanu on percussion, and the usual mob, Tom Scott and other people as well. Very nice album. Not as good. The other 2 were Misrab and Rambler, and I think they're probably better than this one, but it's still nice. And apart from the midlife crisis, Harley Davidson.
Sometimes with comp albums, you forget what's actually on them, and this was the case with this album, which I just pulled out yesterday, Blue Break Beats Volume 2. There was a sort of period in the early 90s when Blue Note was sort of being mined for bossa, funk, break beats, and those various compilations came out. I don't think I've got Blue Break Beats Volume 1, but last track on side 2 is a fantastic Duke Pearson track called The Phantom, which, absolutely lives up to the breakbeats moniker. Really, really fabulously groovy track. You said Airto's on it.
Yeah, Airto's and Bobby Hutcherson on it as well.
Yeah,
so
Bobby Hutcherson.
It's a very nice record.
Yeah, really nice.
Right, really, really ramming home the terrible cover. Stakes now. This is a record I've been looking for quite a while. Actually, I read about it on a website called Sound Insights, which has
that's it. We've got it now. Beautiful.
Has features about music nobody else seems to write about. Patrick Williams had a whole string of records on MPS. He also wrote a lot of television and film themes. That's right, absolutely. He also wrote the music for the Mary Tyler Moore Show and various other stuff in the States. And this is an instrumental album.
Look at the back of that head.
Look at the back of that head. Yeah.
Get the light right there. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Look at that cigar.
Cigar. But actually a fantastic record. And played the track on the 6th day, which has absolutely... It's mostly kind of West Coast studio musicians, John Guerin, Tom Scott, all those kind of people, absolutely going for it though. In the major and has incredible drumming from John Guerin on here, which is why it's been sampled so much. But yeah, so string of albums. Actually, some of them, quite a few of them are quite good. But he's not exactly it's not exactly a good look he's got on that thing. Definitely not.
But absolutely, one of the real standout tracks of last night was this. I've never
quite hard to find this, but actually worth digging out. Actually, some great playing on here. Some good guitar playing by Larry Carlton and Dennis Budema on here. Yeah, Patrick Williams.
Not quite sure what led us on to Pastor T.L. Barrett and the Youth for Christ Choir and the album Sings, or Like a Ship Without a Sail. This is a Numero group re-release. I'm not quite sure how I came across this, but I think it might have been to do with a bit of looking around YouTube. But a just absolutely fabulous album of early 70s,
really good,
sort of soulful gospel, really, with a backing band which features quite a few of the sort of is it the cadets?
Chess cadets
sort of players, and Phil Upchurch I know is playing bass, and just very, very powerful music. I mean, a massive choir, not necessarily the most sort of schooled choir, but the soulful spiritual energy, and actually Pastor T.L. Barrett's voice is fantastic as well. Really, really highly recommended.
Very good record. Didn't know that one at all, actually. Keeping with a heavy spirituality, but moving slightly to another mode, went for Alice Coltrane's World Galaxy, which has just been reissued, I think, in some format. Right, this is an original though. Played for the Galaxy in Sacha Dhananda, I think you pronounce it. It's a period from where she was actually using a harp more than piano, lots of very, very lush strings. Really, I'm very fond of this record, actually. And it's just before she started moving almost into purely devotional music after then. But yeah, Alice Coltrane, what can you say about Alice, really?
Fantastic
just
cover.
A unique voice. Great Peter Max cover. Who didn't do... Definitely.
Last month, so on the Sunday after the session, we did our little session in Ramsgate, and I found this record, which I know John has played before, and actually ended up being given it by the guy who runs the shop, which is really nice. And it's a Temptations album from the mid-70s, 75, called Song for You. And normally it's the sort of, there's a lot of kind of P-Funk players on this album, and side one is particularly funky, but I actually played the first track on side two, the title of the album, Song for You, the Leon Russell tune, which just had a fantastic vocal performance from Dennis Edwards. And very highly recommended. I think quite an easy album to find.
Kind of got overlooked because it was the first one after Norman Whitfield. I went to, didn't get. I went to Trinidad last week to do some work. Not always a connection between Barry White and Trinidad, I don't know. But they found a very good record shop called The Berg, which is in Port of Spain in Trinidad. And I said I'd give them a name check. Picked up a bunch of stuff that's been kind of sitting around on my kind of wants list for quite a long time, and picked up this Barry White album, Is This What You Want?, which was kind of still kind of mid-70s period, and played the track You'll Love off here, which is almost like weirdly like trance music. It's kind of instrumental. Yeah, so not one of the total classic Barry Whites, but a good one nonetheless.
Very good, a beautiful orchestration and arrangement.
So check out The Berg in
Trinidad,
Port of Spain, if you go there.
It was the voice of Barry White and the sort of speaking bit put me in mind of this. I guess it was what was called street soul back in the early 90s. This came out in 1992. UK street soul, an artist called Sinclair, and the track called I Want You Back, which was a real kind of contemporary fusion of the sort of vintage sort of two-step meets reggae kind of sound. The sort of track you'd hear at about 3 a.m. at a party in Hackney. Probably not these days, but certainly back in the early 90s you might have.
Definitely not. I'm not sure why I went for from that to that. I can't remember, but I know Mark on his radio show was talking about how much he likes a nice coda. So I went for Fairy Tales off Anita Baker's compositions, which has a very, very long coda, extended kind of. It doesn't sound like it's going to do it. It's almost like a kind of mid-tempo kind of soul tune, usual great sing, but then goes into this very, very long instrumental section at the end of it with a great piano solo from I've never had Greg Filan.
Gaines or something.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but anyway, him on it as well. Yeah, I've always loved Anita Baker's voice. Actually, kind of wish.
It was quite funny because sort of midway through the coda, my wife and daughter, who arrived, they'd been singing in the Dream of Gerontius at Canterbury Cathedral. They arrived in full kind of evening gowns,
that's right.
which was kind of quite surreal. Just an album which I've rediscovered. Just thinking of amazing female vocalists, and it's the Shaka Khan, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis produced album called Funk This, and the track called Hail to the Wrong, absolutely fabulous. Sort of, I think it's a 90s album, isn't it? But you sort of heard the Jam and Lewis signature, but sort of in a sort of 90s context, and sounded fantastic.
Just realised we played no rock music at all, did we? This session whatsoever.
No.
Which is quite unusual. Another one picked up in Trinidad was the extended version of Stars in Your Eyes, which is Herbie Hancock, 10-minute version of a track from the album Monster, which is not a great record actually, but that track is just great.
Yeah,
actually really, really
and
good.
the 12-inch is the one.
12-inch, and the guy didn't know it in the shop, so I asked him to play it, and then he didn't want to sell it to me. He did in the end.
I think actually what happened then is we suddenly realised we needed to turn the volume down because it was getting late, and so we moved into a slightly different. Well, this was our own coda for the night. Actually,
this is the only thing that counts as rock music.
Possibly.
Yeah.
This is the second Colin Blunstone solo album, Ennismore, which is good, but you know the first one is pretty hard to beat. But I do love the. There's a few really nice tracks on here, and I particularly like "I Don't Believe in Miracles," which is the track we listened to. It features most of Argent and all the Zombies, I guess, as the backing band. But yeah, beautiful voice, Colin Blunstone.
Then, keeping with a mellow mode, went for from the first Joni Mitchell album, went for the Night in the City of his. It's always been one of my favourite records. I wasn't so keen on Clouds and Ladies in the Canyon, but I think this one of her first ones is absolutely my favourite. Kind of virtually unaccompanied. She's unaccompanied on most tracks, although Stephen Stills was playing bass on this one. So yeah, classic record really. But for me,
I don't know the album.
Really, yeah, very fond of this record. Actually, she's just the more you listen to Joni, the more you realise what a great musician she is, as well as just being obviously a brilliant songwriter and singer.
Again, the purity of Joni's voice got me thinking about Sandy Denny, and we listened to a Fotheringay track called "The Sea" from this fantastic compilation. Came out in 2006 called White Bicycles, which was very much put together by the producer Joe Boyd and featured loads of different tracks that he'd had a hand in basically over the years, and you realise what an incredibly influential producer he was. And yeah, just always struck by Sandy Denny's voice. There's just something completely ethereal and pure about it actually.
I saw him walking down the street a little while ago, actually. And for somebody who was already established by the time the Newport Folk Festival, he looked pretty sprightly, yeah. So, then went for Nine Horses, which was a David Sylvian kind of band he put together with his brother and others in around the same time when he was getting much more experimental with his own music. And this kind of harks back a little more to his earlier solo material, and played the track Wonderful World off here, which is nice, very kind of much more kind of song orientated than Blemish and the other ones around at the same time. And just name check for, if you go to Ben Costello's channel, check out. He did a very nice kind of special just on David Sylvian a few years ago, which was really, really good. So anyway, that's for you, Ben. You didn't talk about this record, I don't think, actually. But
No.
there's the only one you didn't talk about. But
I'm hoping to see Ben is going to be coming to Canterbury
great.
early July.
Oh, great.
So hopefully we're going to catch up. My last track was from the Impressed Volume 2 CD, which is a Giles Peterson curated CD of English or British jazz music, and we listened to Ursula by the Michael Garrick Septet.
Yeah.
John had an interesting story about Michael Garrick,
Yeah,
which maybe he won't repeat now.
no. It's not that interesting.
Well, I thought it was quite funny.
Then my last was a horrible cover, actually, and a kind of slightly cheapo reissue of two of Lenny Bro, the guitarist's albums, 5 O'Clock Bells, and the other one was called Mo Bro. And he's just an amazing guitarist, actually. I've just been hearing his name for a long, long time, really, but never really checked out his music, and he's quite extraordinary. Kind of, not getting a very good kind of cover here. Yeah, just amazing kind of technique. Didn't seem to be interested at all in, didn't seem to care what genre he was playing in, whether it was country music or folk music or jazz, but just unbelievable. It always sounds like a lot of people at the time, everything thought it was two guitarists playing. They wouldn't believe it was one person playing. And I played the track Ebony Queen and Pan's Pad off here. But yeah, definitely worth the original vinyl's quite expensive now, but yeah, it's quite a discovery, actually. I must have been getting into his stuff.
Yeah, he sort of seamlessly moves between styles.
Yeah.
Really, yeah, you barely notice that you're suddenly listening to a folk style into a jazz style into a Spanish kind of feel.
Yeah.
And that's it. Just want to plug the radio show, the All Points radio show, which will have its the link underneath this video, and just to say, yeah, thank you to people who've been tuning in, people who've been commenting on our videos.
It's good to see Big Star back.
Very good to see Big Star.
We're thinking about trying to do a live stream as well at some point or other.
Yeah, if people think that would be interesting. And yeah, just very lively back in the VC. A lot of old faces coming back, and lovely to see Chris and John Coltrane.
Yeah.
And glowing 00 Cabbage, amongst others, and of course Fred.
Yeah.
And there was a great, I don't know if you saw the Fred and Campo double header.
No, I need to watch
which
that.
I know that they are inspired by what we do.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm definitely going to check that out.
And it was great, actually. So, yeah. Anyway, thanks, people.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Peace to everyone.